Hi, today's video is a start of a series of videos I'm going to make about the NuTone NM series AM/FM radio intercom systems. There's not a lot of information available about the NM series, and I do get a lot of questions from people about them, and I thought it might be a good opportunity to make some videos to explain about them and see what we can learn. This is going to be a three-part series at least, part of my attempt to keep my videos a little shorter than they normally are. So the three parts are going to be an overview of the NM series, which is this video, and then there'll be a teardown video of a NM series Master Station, and then we're going to make a third video which is an attempted repair of a common problem, which is a failed backlight on the LCD screen. To understand about the NM series, you have to understand the history of it a little bit. So without going into too much detail, what you have to know is that the NM series, this is an NM100, the NM series is not actually a NuTone Intercom system. It's actually a rebranded or rebadged music and sound, or now called linear technologies, DMC3-4. The NuTone NM200 is a rebranded or rebadged linear technologies DMC1. The DMC1 and the DMC3-4 actually were already in production before the NM series came out, and NuTone was at the end of their production on the IMA 3303s and the IMA 4406s, and they needed to come up with a new model, so they restyled the cosmetics of the linear or music and sound systems and created the NM series for NuTone. NM stands for New Master, and we have the NM200 model, which uses Cat5, primarily designed for new construction, and it can be used to update older 6-wire NuTone systems. And then you have the NM100, which is a 3 or 4-wire system that's designed primarily for updating older NuTone or music and sound 3 and 4-wire systems. So for us sort of hardcore NuTone people, this is not really a NuTone intercom. This is really a rebranded music and sound or linear technology system. This was not designed by the former engineering staff at NuTone. It's just a model that they revamped for us to sell. So a lot of this that I'm going to show and explain will be similar or exactly the same perhaps as what you would see if you had a DMC3-4, which is again the music and sound or linear equivalent of a NuTone NM100. So the NM100 is a smaller form factor than the previous, say, IM3303. There'll be a lot of comparisons between this one and the 3303 because it was the previous model, and this is the model that replaced the 3303. So making comparisons makes it easier to explain things. So we have a smaller form factor. It's about the same width. It's about 2/3 the height of an IM3303, and it was styled to fit in today's lifestyles better. Smaller footprint on the wall with more modern styling for people who are looking to build new homes. It has a backlit LCD display here. Your intercom room control switches are behind this door that opens on the left, and it has the capacity. There are 9 individual room control switches. This bottom one where it's marked P is for patio, and this top one where it's marked M is the master station itself. You have the same type of intercom room selection functions as you did on the previous IMA 3303. You can set rooms to intercom only or radio and intercom. You can turn rooms off altogether, or you can place rooms in a monitor or listen-in position. Inside the door, there are some quick reference instructions for common things that you would maybe want to adjust on a regular basis, how to preset radio stations, if you have a door release function, how that works, change the auto on volume, tuner scan functions, adjust the LCD backlight display, brightness, and things like that. Behind this panel, this does come off. This is just a cover panel for the speaker here. It gives you access to one of the two mounting screws which holds it to the wall housing, which is here and here. There is a microphone built into the NM100 Master Station. There's a little condenser mic right here. The room stations don't have condenser mics. They just use the speaker cone as a microphone when you're speaking into it. The NM series uses fairly small size speaker cones. In fact, if we measure this, we see that the speaker cone is about 1.5 inches by 3 inches compared to the IMA 3303, which had a larger oval speaker. This size speaker cone is also used in the remote speakers, which would be the NRS 103s or NRS 104s. In the previous speakers, the ISA 335s, they used a 5-inch diameter cone. So the sound quality of these is not quite as good. The rule has always been little speaker, little sound, big speaker, big sound, and I suppose these are considered oval speakers. Oval speakers don't have as good a fidelity as round speakers do, and that's just the long and the short of speakers. It has modern styling. The intercom controls are fairly easy to operate. You only have 2 intercom control buttons on the Master. You have a push to talk and then a push to listen button. And if you want, and these are for the inside and patio stations, and if you want to answer the front door, door talk is both buttons pressed at one time. And then there's an automatic hands-free reply from the front door to hear the visitor respond to your question, who's there? One of the things that gets overlooked on these a lot is on this panel behind the door on the left, there is also a little access hole right here on the panel, and there's a label above it that says reset. There is a reset button on the circuit board behind this. The easiest way to do this is you need a paper clip. It's a very, very small hole, and you're pushing, again, just a little micro switch, so it's easy to do. If you take a paper clip and unfold it, you can insert it into the hole and sort of, I suppose, jab around at it a little bit, and eventually you'll find the switch, you push it, and that resets the Master Station. You have your common controls here. You have a power button. We'll jump over the tone button for the moment. Power turns the music on, or the audio on. The NM100, when it's powered up, it's always in an on state. The intercom is ready to be used, the radio is ready to be turned on, and the door chime, if you go with the optional chime module, is ready to ring. So the power button turns the music on. Source switches you between your different audio inputs. It has a built-in AM and FM tuner, and then there are 2 auxiliary inputs on the back of the unit that you can access through this. It always, when you power it on, it always powers on at whatever the last audio source you were listening to is. So that's a convenient feature. You have electronic volume adjustments up and down. You have an auto button. Auto, this has a built-in timer that's programmable, so you could program it to turn the radio or your audio source on at, say, 8 o'clock in the morning and then off at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And when you want it to follow those preset times, you put it in auto mode, and on the display it'll show auto. You have a time button. This sets the clock, and it also sets the auto on and off times. You have a button to access your preset radio stations. You're able on the NM100 and NM200 to program in 8 AM and 8 FM stations, and you have electronic tuning buttons here. The NM series has a Seek style tuner, which means that when you push the button, it will scan up the scale or up the dial, and when it reaches the next strong station that has enough signal for it to lock into, it will simply stop at that station. It's not a scan tuner where it stops and pauses for a few seconds and then scans again. It just seeks up the dial or down the dial, depending on which button you push, and it stops at that station. And then if you want to program it in, you can push both buttons to do that. So the controls are pretty good. The one control that's a little confusing on the NM series is the button marked as tone. And I've often thought that this button, instead of being called tone, it should have been called menu. Like a lot of modern electronics, a lot of the adjustments for the system and for the master station are done in menus. They're electronic adjustments. This is not what I consider a knob and switch model so much as it is a model with menus. So think of your tone button as a menu button, and when we power this up, I'll take you through the different aspects of the menus so you can see how that works. One of the other features that the NM series has is what I would call remote music control from your inside or patio remote stations. It allows you to not only use the intercom functions, but it also allows you to power on the audio of the system. You can scroll through your different audio sources. You can scroll through your preset AM and FM radio stations. You can control the music level throughout the house as well as the music level in each room. The remote stations have a volume knob for the local adjustment in that room, but you can adjust the system-wide levels from the remote stations also. So it has a lot of features. Some of them work well, some of them not so much. That's sort of an overview of this. So let's go ahead and power this up. I'll show you what the menu options are, and we'll go from there. Alright, so we have our NM100 powered up now, and you can see the standard display shows the time, and I didn't bother to set it, so it's 12:01 a.m., which it's not really. One of the things about your tone button, or in this case, let's call it the menu button right here, is that the menus that come up when you operate the button are different depending on whether or not you have the radio or the audio turned on by using the power button. So right now the power button is off, and if we use the menu button, if we push it once, we have intercom volume, and I suppose I should do it this way. So we turned menu button. Oh, and one of the things you have to know about the menu button is it requires you to keep operating the buttons, otherwise it times out and goes back to the clock. So you have to move along with it rather speedily, otherwise it keeps going back to the time. So if we push it once, the first adjustment is intercom volume, and we use the volume buttons, and the little bar graph goes down and the number decreases, and we can go down to 0, which would be no intercom volume, or we can let it ramp up and it maxes out at 29. In most homes, setting it somewhere around 18 or 19 is usually right. Depends on the number of stations that you have and the acoustics of the home and all of those kind of things. So you can see it timed out again. So we'll go back. We have intercom volume, and then we also have master volume. That's the volume of the sound that comes out of the speaker that's built into the master station. As I mentioned before, the remote stations all have individual volume control knobs, just like you would expect, or if you had an older system, you're used to having a knob that you turn in each room to adjust the volume. I suppose they didn't want to clutter up the look of the NM100 with a mechanical volume knob or hide it away behind the door so you'd have to open it every time. So it's an electronic adjustment. So if we go back to master volume, you can lower it down just like we did the intercom volume to 0, and then it will ramp back up. Notice the fancy bar graph that goes up, and again it maxes out at 29. Where this is set in most homes depends on how loud you like to have the music. I find for most of my customers somewhere around 12 is usually pretty close to being right, and that's all there is. Now you have to remember those are the menu choices while the audio is turned off. Now we're going to go ahead and turn the audio on. And by default, when a new master is installed, the first audio source that comes up when you power it on is auxiliary. I don't have an antenna or anything connected to this because it's not really that relevant for what I'm talking about, but we will switch through the sources. So if we use the source button, we're on auxiliary. Then we have AM and FM, and then CD, and then back to auxiliary. They did used to make a 6-disc CD changer for the linear or music and sound models. It was a DMC CD, and for the NuTone it was an I think it was a NA3000 something, I don't know. They didn't make it for very long. It was very expensive, and CDs pretty much have fallen by the wayside where it wasn't very popular, and it was discontinued a few years ago. If you had the CD option, it would be mounted in a larger wall housing below the master station, so it's sort of as one big unit. So we're on auxiliary, our power's on, we're on auxiliary, so we don't have a lot of static. And now we'll look at our menu selections again. If we push it once, we have master speaker volume, which we already previously set to 12. Now we have a new menu, which is loudness, on or off. Loudness adds more bass into the audio for the music, not for the intercom. And loudness is an interesting thing. Loudness is any receiver or amplifier that has a loudness control. It's a predetermined, it's a curve. So at low volume, it may boost the bass of the music maybe 8 decibels, but as you increase the volume of the music, there's a curve, it's a standardized curve, and as you raise the volume, it decreases the bass boost that's supplied to the music, so it doesn't become overly bassy. So again, we'll go back to loudness. You use the volume buttons. If we push the down button, it turns it off, and the up button turns it on. One of the problems with the loudness control is the small size speaker cones in the master station and the remote speakers, they don't deal with extra bass very well. So you have to be careful that when you say your bass adjustment, which we'll come to in a second, and the loudness control, that you're not overdriving the speakers and they sound boomy and distorted. So we'll go back to loudness. I'm going to turn it off. And then our next adjustment is treble. And again, just like the other controls, you can raise it up. It maxes out at 14, or you can lower it down to 0. If you want it to be in the mid-range, 7 would be your mid-range setting. That would be considered a flat setting. It's not a greater amount of treble, and it's not a lesser amount of treble. It's just right in the middle. And you can see how the menus keep timing out. So we'll go again past treble. Now we have a bass adjustment, and again we can raise it up to 14, or we can lower it down to 0. Once again, if we set it to 7, that would be in the mid-range of the adjustment, and that would be considered flat. No added bass, no diminishing of the bass, no lesser bass, just right in the middle. And again, you want to set your bass depending on the kind of music you like to listen to, and to make sure that the speakers don't sound overly bassy or distorted where it's not pleasant to listen to the music. And then we already have set our intercom volume to 19. And our last one is music volume. And it would have been better if this had said music volume to all speakers. Music volume is a house-wide adjustment. So on a comparable IMA 3303 or an IMA 4406, it would be what we would refer to as system volume. It sets the maximum audio level for the music that any speaker can play anywhere in the house or that's connected to the system. So if we go back to passed it by. Music volume, if we lower it down, let's say we start at 10, all of the speakers throughout the house, if they're set to their maximum physical volume by turning the knob, I'm pushing the button so it doesn't time out. No speaker can play louder than 10. If we lower it down to 0, you would have no audio throughout the house. And if you raised it all of the way up to 29, it would be so blastingly loud and would sound so horrible that you couldn't possibly listen to it. what I find for most of my customers is most people keep it set somewhere between 9 and 12 is about the right level. But again, you adjust it to your liking for your home and the acoustics of your home and the number of speakers you have and all of those kind of things. So we're going to go ahead and set it at 12, and now we want it to time out. And there you go. So now we've set up all the menu adjustments, and you can see it becomes a little bit confusing sometimes, and you have to move through it rather rapidly, otherwise it keeps resetting, which people find annoying and those kind of things, but that's the way it was designed. Now, we talked about on your remote stations, it has the ability to, one, turn the music on throughout the house, and then you can raise up the music level throughout the house by using the control buttons, and I will do a video about the remote speakers also, I think. So if you're at a remote speaker and the volume is the system volume, or I'm sorry, it's not the system volume, it's the music volume. If the music volume is set too low, let's say somebody before you was listening to it and they had it set really low at 5, and then you're in the garage and you're trying to do some work, and 5 is too low, by using the controls on the remote speaker, you can actually raise up the music level. You're actually making the adjustment on the master station, but you're doing it from the remote speaker, and you can raise it up and make it louder throughout the house. So it's a convenient thing, and then when you're done, you can also turn the music off. When you're turning the music off remotely or on remotely, what you're actually doing, let's say you have the music on in the garage and it's at 18 and you want to turn it off throughout the entire house. Timeout. Hate timeout. Okay, you hold the control down on the remote speaker, it slowly ramps the volume down to 0, and once you reach 0, if you keep holding the button down on the remote speaker, it turns the radio or the audio source off. So that's how that works. When you go to turn it back on, it begins at 0, it turns on, and then it slowly ramps it back up, and you set it to wherever you want. So that's how the controls on this work. When you go to set your preset, program your preset AM and FM radio stations, what you would do is we'll switch to, oops, wrong thing. We'll switch to FM. There's no antenna, so it's not going to stop anywhere. It's just going to continue to seek up the scale looking for a strong station, but without an antenna we're not going to get any. And let's pretend that this is a station we want. To program that into a preset, you simply push the up and down tuning buttons at the same time, and you can see here it's programmed it into preset 01, and then we'll go up one more and we'll stop it there, and we'll program it again. Now it's in preset 2, and then you can use the preset button to access the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 not programmed, so they're all 87.5, and now it's going to switch to preset 1, which we programmed 95.1, and then preset 2, 96.1. So that's how that works. So it's pretty easy. The auto button, when you hit this, it comes up here on the display, it says auto. To program the timer, you use the time button. I guess we should program the time first. So you push it once, the hours flash, and use the volume adjustments for up and down. So we're going to go down and make it 11. Oops, it's 11 a.m. It's a morning video. 11:07 a.m. And then we're going to do, says set auto on time, so we'll set it for 3:10 as our auto on time, and then we'll set it for 4:30 as our auto off time. And then if you use the auto button, it'll follow those times that you've programmed in. When you want to sleep in on Saturday, you don't want to get woken up by your intercom radio or audio, you can turn the auto off. So that's the basics of the controls. Pretty easy if you understand all the nuances of how it works. That's sort of a brief overview of the NM100. For the most part, the NM series has been relatively trouble-free. Some of the earlier ones have had problems with amplifiers, and some of them have had problems with power supplies, but none of that is really uncommon for any kind of electronic device that's on all the time. The biggest single problem with the NM series overall is the display assembly. This is a backlit LCD display. LCD stands for liquid crystal display, and the segments, say in this number 8 right here, you can see it's made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 individual segments of liquid crystal, and it changes as the microcontroller drives the clock and changes the time. But to be able to see this, there are, I believe, LEDs behind the display panel which light up the segment so you can see it across the room. The backlight on the displays sometimes will fail, and I think that's the single largest problem on the NM series. So that's going to be part of what we're going to look at. That's probably going to be in video number 3. So that's an overview of the NM series. The next one will be a teardown. We'll take it apart. We're going to look at all the boards and see what we can learn. One of the other things about the NM series that people need to know about is that there's a real lack of repair support on these models. As it stands today, and we're in August of 2016, there are no service manuals, there are no schematics, there are no circuit boards, and there are no parts. So there is no real factory support on these models, and as they get older and they begin to have the normal problems that older electronics have, the repair of these will become more and more important and also more and more challenging. Right now, as it stands today, if you have an NM series and it's out of its 2-year warranty, the recommended solution is that it be boxed up and sent back to NuTone, where they will repair it and send it back to you and charge you for it. We haven't developed the necessary information or skills to work on these yet, because as it stands right now, the demand for that is rather low. But it's also, and this is not an uncommon thing. The other thing that people probably don't know is that if we go back one series, and we've talked about the IMA 3303 and the IMA 4406, which were models that were introduced in the mid-90s and were in production through the mid-2000s, those models don't have service manuals, don't have much in the way of schematics. 3303 is not great. There's a little bit available. 4406 is, it's like we're on our own here. There are no boards, there are no parts. It's like the Wild West when we first had to start fixing them, and it was all up to us to figure out how to do that. And we have kind of the same situation with the NM series, where we're not getting a lot of factory support on trying to figure out how to repair them or for parts. And because these are a more specialized design, there are some components and some parts for it that if there is a real problem with, it's going to be really difficult to solve. So that's part of the reason for these videos, is to get the basic information out there, because these systems are beginning to age, and we do get more and more people asking about problems with them, and we feel it's necessary to be prepared for those people. So that's what this is all about. That's an overview of the NM100. The NM200 appearance, controls, features, almost identical. The intercom control buttons work slightly differently because it's a 6-wire system instead of a 3-wire system, but fundamentally it's just, these are just variations on a basic design. So that's all for today. I hope this enlightened you about the NM series a little bit. There will be more videos coming up about this, so you'll have to watch them all to learn everything you probably need to know. That's all for today. See you in the next video. Oh, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give it a thumbs up. All those things help a lot. You know, we don't have advertising on our YouTube channel. We're doing this just to inform people and get the basic information out there in the world. And if you watch the videos and find them helpful, even a little bit, subscribe to our channel. It helps our ratings. It helps people find us in YouTube searches, and more people can find our information. It's not a lot to ask. See you in the next video.